The Australian outback holds many silences. There is the quiet of the midday heat, a heavy blanket, that smothering sound. There is the stillness of the night, broken only by the distant call of a curlew. But the silence that fell over Oak Park Station on that fateful afternoon was of a different kind. It was not a natural silence, but an absence, a void where the sound of a 4-year-old boy's laughter should have been. It was just before 5 p.m., the golden hour when the harsh Queensland sun begins to soften, casting long, dramatic shadows across the vast, remote cattle property. For Margaret Lamont, the image was one of mundane peace. Her grandson, Augustus Gus Lamont, was playing on the veranda of the homestead, a small, vibrant figure against the weathered wood and timeless landscape. The scene was a portrait of rural normality, a moment so ordinary it would later be remembered with a sense of profound betrayal. A grandmother's glance away, a moment spent on a household chore, a conversation half heard, a simple lapse in the constant vigilance that defines childcare, was all it took. When Margaret's eyes returned to the veranda, it was empty. The toys were there. The impression of where he had been sitting was perhaps still visible in the mind's eye. But Gus was gone. The initial calls were met with nothing but the whispering wind. The quick checks of his favorite hiding spots yielded nothing. The familial search of the immediate homestead grounds uncovered no sign. This was not a child hiding behind a sofa. This was a disappearance into an immense and ancient landscape. Within an hour, the first police units were on the scene, and the tranquil outback station was transformed into the epicenter of a modern-day nightmare, a puzzle that would, over the coming days and weeks, defy every logical explanation and expose the limits of human investigation in the face of the unknown. The response was immediate and massive. The disappearance of a child triggers a primal urgency, and the resources marshaled by the Queensland Police Service were testament to the gravity of the situation. Task Force Horizon was established, a dedicated team of detectives, forensic specialists, and search and rescue coordinators whose sole mission was to find Gus Lamont. They were immediately confronted with a fundamental, terrifying reality. The rules of urban investigation did not apply here. Oak Park Station sprawls over hundreds of thousands of acres of classic Gulf country terrain, a brutal mosaic of sun-baked clay pans, dense scrub, dry creek beds, and rugged limestone ridges. It is an environment that can be disorienting to the uninitiated and unforgiving to the vulnerable. The search perimeter, established within hours of Gus's reported disappearance, was staggering in its scale, eventually encompassing over 60,000 hectares. For 9 agonizing days, the silence of the outback was shattered by the relentless hum of human endeavor. On the ground, lines of State Emergency Service, SES, volunteers and police officers moved in meticulous grid patterns, their eyes scanning the cracked earth for a shred of fabric, a disturbed rock, any clue that might break the spell. They battled the oppressive heat, the tangled undergrowth, and the psychological weight of the task. Alongside them, highly trained tracking dogs swept the area, their powerful noses seeking a scent trail that seemed to have been severed by an invisible hand. From the skies, technology joined the fight. Police helicopters equipped with advanced thermal imaging systems crisscrossed the property, their cameras searching for the heat signature of a small body. Drones, nimble and persistent, buzzed over areas inaccessible to ground crews, capturing thousands of high-resolution photographs and video feeds that would later be scrutinized pixel by pixel. It was a search operation of unprecedented scope for the region, a Herculean effort that combined boot-leather determination with cutting-edge technology. And then, a breakthrough. Or, what seemed like one. Approximately 500 meters north of the homestead, a sharp-eyed searcher spotted a single, clear impression in the red dirt. It was a child's footprint, small and perfectly formed, a heartbreaking testament to a little boy's path. For the search teams, it was a beacon of direction. It suggested that Gus had, as initially feared, simply wandered off. The footprint pointed north, away from the homestead and into the vast, open wilderness. A surge of focused energy was directed along that trajectory. But the hope was short-lived. The story told by the Earth was a frustratingly brief one. There was no second print. No scuff mark, no broken branch, no discarded item. The trail did not peter out. It simply vanished. It was as if Gus had taken that one step and then been lifted from the face of the Earth. The single footprint became not an answer, but the investigation's first great, confounding question. As the physical search continued its fruitless pattern, investigators began to pore over the witness statements, seeking any anomaly, any flicker of a detail that could reorient their compass. It was in a follow-up interview with Margaret Lamont that a new, potentially critical piece of information emerged, a memory that had surfaced from the trauma of that afternoon. She recalled that earlier in the day, before Gus's disappearance, she had heard the distinct sound of a motorbike. It was distant, but its presence in the profound quiet of the outback was notable. She couldn't pinpoint a direction or a time, only the auditory memory itself, the sputter of a single-cylinder engine, an alien sound in that particular context at that particular moment. In a remote location like Oak Park, the sound of a vehicle is as significant as a fingerprint. It signifies human presence, movement, intention. This was no longer just a story about a child who wandered away. This was now a narrative that potentially included another actor. The motorbike became the ghost in the machine of the investigation, a presence that could not be proven, but one that could not be ignored. Task Force Horizon launched a parallel inquiry. They cross-referenced property records, interviewed every station hand and neighbor within a vast radius, and meticulously rescoured the terrain for tire tracks that could not be accounted for by known vehicles. The result was a resounding negative. No unregistered or unexplained motorbikes were located. No mysterious tire tracks were found in the wider search area beyond those of the searchers themselves. No other witness could corroborate having heard the engine. The motorbike existed only in Margaret Lamont's recollection. Was it the crucial key, the means by which an abductor had approached and departed with unimaginable swiftness? Or was it a classic example of a traumatic memory where the mind, in its desperate attempt to make sense of the senseless, latches onto an unrelated, ambient sound? The investigators were now tasked with chasing a sound, a phantom echo in the wind that led them down a path as barren as the first. This uncertainty was compounded days later when a second potential footprint was discovered a staggering 3.5 kilometers from the homestead. The distance was, for a 4-year-old, virtually impossible. The terrain between the homestead and this location was rugged and overgrown, a formidable challenge for a grown adult. Yet the mere possibility demanded scrutiny. Forensic analysis, however, was definitive. The print was deemed unlikely to belong to a child. The size, the depth, the tread pattern, all pointed towards it being made by an adult, most likely one of the hundreds of searchers who had by then crisscrossed the property. Another door slammed shut. But the whisper of the idea remained. What if they were wrong? What if that impossible distance had been covered, not by a little boy's feet, but on the back of a ghost motorbike? While Task Force Horizon wrestled with forensic facts and witness statements, a parallel investigation was unfolding in the digital town square. The story of the little boy lost in the outback captured the national imagination. The hashtag #FindLittleGus trended on social media, a powerful, modern-day beacon of collective hope and concern. Candlelight vigils were held. Donations flooded in to support the family and the volunteer efforts. Initially, the public narrative was one of unified sympathy. The image of the grieving grandmother, holding onto a fragile strength, became the face of the tragedy. Margaret Lamont's public appeals were met with an outpouring of support. She was seen as the heart of a family living every parent's worst fear. Online forums were filled with messages of encouragement. That poor woman, her strength is incredible, and we stand with the Lamont family. But as days turned into a week, and the ground search yielded nothing but a single, inexplicable footprint, the digital mood began to curdle. The same platforms that had been conduits for hope became arenas for suspicion and armchair detective work. The focus of this shifting sentiment often zeroed in on Margaret Lamont herself. Her composure in televised interviews was now analyzed not for its strength, but for its perceived incongruity. Does anyone else find her calm unsettling? became a recurring comment. The motorbike recollection was dissected not as a potential clue, but as a possible diversion. Why is she focusing on a sound she can't even confirm? It feels like she's trying to steer the narrative away from the house, one user speculated. The community fractured into camps: the defenders, who saw a grieving family victimized by circumstance, and the skeptics, who believed that the absence of evidence was itself evidence of a darker truth hidden closer to home. This division was not based on new evidence from police, but on the human psyche's intolerance for an information vacuum. The unknown had to be filled, and in the absence of facts, speculation rushed in. As the physical search was scaled down, the nature of the investigation underwent a fundamental shift. The focus moved from the vast, open spaces of Oak Park Station to the sterile, data-filled rooms of the forensic and intelligence divisions. This was now a ghost hunt in the digital realm, an attempt to find a trace of Gus in the invisible pathways of modern life. Every piece of technology was leveraged. Mobile phone tower data from the entire region was analyzed, looking for any unusual pings, an unknown device that had entered and left the area around the time of the disappearance. The results were another dead end. No anomalous activity was detected. It was as if the outback had swallowed not just a boy, but his digital echo as well. Forensic teams subjected the homestead and its immediate surroundings to a level of scrutiny that bordered on the microscopic. They searched for any sign of a struggle, any minute speck of blood, any evidence of drag marks or disturbance that would suggest foul play. The results were, once again, categorically negative. There was no blood, no DNA evidence belonging to unknown individuals, no signs of a confrontation. Furthermore, specialists assessed the area for any evidence of animal predation, a grim but necessary line of inquiry given the remote location. That, too, was ruled out. The complete absence of any biological evidence, such as hair, clothing fragments, or bone, made such a scenario statistically negligible. The investigation was now confronting a phenomenon that was as baffling as it was terrifying: the complete and total absence of evidence. In the 21st century, with all its forensic and technological prowess, a child could apparently vanish without leaving a single, coherent trace beyond one solitary footprint. This was not just a missing person case, it was a paradox. Theories began to crystallize from this vacuum, each more unsettling than the last. The official line remained, and still remains, that all possibilities are open. But unofficially, investigators and the public were left with a handful of deeply flawed scenarios. The first, and initially most plausible, was the accidental death theory, that Gus had wandered off, succumbed to the elements or a fall in a hidden crevice, and his body simply had not been found. This was the theory that justified the massive land search. Yet, the failure of that search, combined with the expertise of the trackers and the capabilities of the thermal technology, made this increasingly difficult to accept. The outback is vast, but it is not a black hole. Trained searchers and technology are remarkably effective at finding what is there to be found. This led to the second and more sinister theory: abduction. The motorbike recollection was the tantalizing centerpiece of this idea. Could an opportunist, or someone who had been watching the property, have seized a moment of incredible chance? The swiftness and cleanliness of the act would have had to be professional in its execution. It would explain the lack of a continuous trail, the absence of a body, and the motorbike sound. But it raised its own set of monumental questions.
Why?
Why take a child from a remote cattle station where the risks of being seen, however slim, were immense? How did the abductor know Gus would be there, alone on that veranda, at that precise moment? And most perplexingly, how had they left no trace, no vehicle tracks beyond the search perimeter, no digital footprint, no witnesses beyond one unverifiable sound? A third, more complex theory involved the possibility of an undiscovered accident on the property itself, followed by a panicked cover-up. This was the theory that festered in the darker corners of the online discourse, and one that police would have been professionally obligated to consider, however discreetly. It was a theory built entirely on the perceived inconsistencies in the human element rather than on physical proof. It sought to explain the lack of evidence by suggesting it had been meticulously erased. Yet, after exhaustive background checks, financial investigations, and repeated interviews, no motive, no opportunity, and no credible evidence ever emerged to support this line of inquiry. It remained a theory born from the frustration of the case's impenetrability, a narrative constructed to fill a void that facts could not. Today, the case of Gus Lamont remains open but inactive in the public eye, a cold case that retains a low, constant temperature of mystery. The official file has not been closed, but the frantic energy has dissipated, replaced by the slow, periodic review of old evidence. For the detectives of Task Force Horizon, it is a professional scar, a puzzle they dedicated weeks of their lives to solving, only to be left with a collection of non-clues and unanswerable questions. The single footprint is preserved in photographs and casts. The witness statements are filed away. The data from the phones and drones is stored on servers. They wait for the one phone call, the one piece of new information that might make sense of it all. For the family, particularly Margaret Lamont, the silence is a life sentence. There is no grave to visit, no closure to be had, only the perpetual, haunting limbo of not knowing. The landscape that was once their home is now a place of profound trauma, every gust of wind potentially carrying the echo of a lost laugh or the ghost of a motorbike engine. And for the public, the case of the boy who vanished from Oak Park Station endures as a chilling campfire story for the modern age, a stark reminder that there are still shadows in our world that our brightest lights cannot penetrate. It raises profound and uncomfortable questions about the reliability of memory, the limits of technology, and the terrifying possibility that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. The Outback kept its secret. The dust settled, and the file on Augustus Gus Lamont remains a testament to the most frightening answer an investigation can ever yield: nothing at all. The unsettling truth is that we may never know if what happened was a tragic accident, a perfectly executed crime, or something else entirely, lost forever to the immense, silent heart of Australia.